My husband thought his orphan wife would beg to stay, but when his first love faked a staircase fall, I signed the divorce papers. My husband thought that, because I was an orphan, I would never dare to leave him. He thought I had nowhere to go, no family to run to, no one powerful enough to stand behind me, and no dignity strong enough to survive without his name. So, when his childhood sweetheart, Fabiana, deliberately fell down the stairs to frame me, Eduardo used the threat of divorce to force me to apologize. But I did not explain myself. I did not cry harder, beg louder, or try to prove my innocence to people who had already decided I was guilty. I simply picked up my bag, walked to the table, and signed the divorce papers. The entire family froze. They had expected me to resist. They had expected me to tremble, plead, and cling to that marriage, as if it were the only roof left over my head. They thought I would be terrified of losing their money, their mansion, their status, and the last name they had always treated like a gift I did not deserve. But I signed without hesitation. Eduardo was the most shocked of all. The moment my pen touched the paper, something strange crossed his face. For the first time that day, he looked uneasy, as if my silence had done something his anger could not understand. "Didn't you read the agreement?" he asked, his voice sharp with curiosity. I wiped the tears from my face. Then I smiled, not softly, not weakly, but with a brightness that stunned even me. "I may be poor, I may be an orphan, but when I saved your grandmother's life, I never expected anything in return. She was the one who asked me to marry you, and she offered to cover my school expenses. But I don't need your money anymore." I looked him directly in the eyes, and for the first time in that house, I felt something solid rise inside me. Then I opened my backpack and emptied everything onto the floor. Textbooks, pens, notebooks, nothing more. Eduardo stared at the scattered things as if they were impossible to understand. "When I came into this house, I had nothing but these," I said. "I knew none of you would ever truly accept me as your daughter-in-law, so I tried to fit in. I became your maid. I did everything without complaint. I swallowed every insult, every order, every cold look. And in return, I received nothing but humiliation." I paused, letting every word settle over them. "Everyone thought I married your son for money, so here is all your money back." I took out a small notebook and one bank card, then placed them in Eduardo's hand. "This notebook contains every cent any of you gave me. I never spent a single penny. I opened an account and deposited everything there. I thought one day there might come a time when you would care for me in return, when you would see me as a person instead of a burden. But I was wrong. So I am giving it all back." Then I turned to Dona Helena. She held the card in her hand like it suddenly weighed more than she could bear. "Mrs. Helena," I said with icy calm, "you agreed to pay my tuition in exchange for me marrying your grandson. I no longer need that arrangement. I am returning everything." Dona Helena's eyes filled with tears, but I did not soften. Betrayal had hardened my heart in a way her tears could not reach. "How do we know this card even works?" Renata asked. Because of course Renata would think of money first. I turned and gave her a cold look. She shrank back in her seat. "You can check at the bank. I am not afraid of losing wealth. I am not like you, terrified of poverty." The room went silent. They were seeing a side of me they had never allowed themselves to imagine. Not the quiet orphan, not the grateful girl, not the maid in a wedding ring. I stood there different, unshakable, and calm in a way that frightened them. Then my eyes moved to Fabiana. She was still leaning weakly in Eduardo's arms, playing fragile, pretending to be wounded. But I saw it. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips, and in that instant, everything became clear. Fabiana had faked her injury. She had staged the fall. She had framed me, manipulated Eduardo, and used his feelings for her to push him into divorcing me. Rage rose inside me so fast I could barely breathe. I walked toward Eduardo and Fabiana, my fury clear on my face. Fabiana trembled, but this time I could see the performance behind it. Juliana smirked with malice. "Regretting the divorce now?" she said. "It's too late." I ignored her and stared straight at Fabiana. "Did I push you, miss?" I asked, my voice cold enough to cut glass. "Did I?" Fabiana shrank deeper into Eduardo's arms, her acting suddenly less steady. "I'm scared," she cried. "Please make her leave." Eduardo's voice was cold. "Leisha, you already signed the papers. What more do you want?" I laughed. There was no joy in it. Only bitterness. Only pain. Then my laughter stopped. Without warning, I raised my hand and slapped Fabiana across the face. The sound echoed through the room. Everyone froze. Eduardo exploded with anger. "Leisha!" he shouted, rising to confront me. But before he could take another step, I raised my hand again and slapped him too. The shock in that room was absolute. No one had ever dared to hit Eduardo. Certainly not me. Certainly not his poor orphan wife. The woman they believed would always bow her head. I looked back at Fabiana. "That slap was for falsely accusing me," I said. "If I had known you were planning to frame me, maybe I would have pushed you down the stairs myself. You do not deserve to stand here, playing with people's lives just to get your way." Then I turned to Eduardo. "And you?" I said, my eyes locked on his. "You not only chose her over me, you conspired with her to destroy me. I may be poor, but I know what it means to be human. I am not as ruthless as your lover, willing to go that far just to deceive and hurt someone." My voice trembled, but I did not break. "You two deserve each other. I stand for peace. I will not chase revenge today. But I am done with this family. From now on, we are strangers. And if our paths ever cross again, I will destroy you. I will destroy us both if I have to." With those final words, I turned away. My heart was heavy with pain and anger, but my steps did not falter. Behind me, the family remained speechless. I walked out of the mansion and into the rain. Outside, I stood beneath the storm and looked up at the sky. My tears mixed with the rain until I could no longer tell which was which. After everything I had done for them, was this how it ended? I laughed bitterly at myself, then called my best friend, Enrique, and asked him to come pick me up. Inside the mansion, Eduardo watched me from the window. I did not see him, but later I would learn that my hunched figure beneath the rain stirred something in him. He clenched his fists and wondered why everything felt so wrong, why I looked so broken, why watching me leave hurt more than he expected. Then a white car pulled up outside. Enrique stepped out, tall and handsome, holding an umbrella. I could not feel my feet anymore. The rain was pouring so hard that it had soaked every inch of my body, but I still stood there on the sidewalk and waited. It was not only about needing a ride, it was about pride. I wanted that family to see, one last time, that I would not beg, I would not plead. My pain was quiet, but it had dignity. Enrique rushed toward me, his eyes wide with shock and fury. "Leisha, what did they do to you?" I only smiled. It was a hollow, empty smile. I could not tell whether it came from irony, exhaustion, or some twisted instinct to survive. I got into the car without saying a word. Enrique turned on the heater and offered me his jacket, but I refused it. In that moment, I needed to feel the cold. I needed it to remind me that this was not a nightmare. It was real. I had truly lived through hell inside what I now called, in my mind, the Lion's Mansion. A family had devoured me, piece by piece, and I had finally crawled out. "Do you want to go to my place or back to Dona Olivia's boarding house?" Enrique asked, as he drove slowly through the rain. "Dona Olivia's," I replied. At least there, no one would ask questions. At least there, I could become invisible again. And for the first time, that invisibility felt like freedom. When I arrived, I went straight to the tiny room I had rented before the marriage. It felt like walking backward in time, except now my soul was completely shattered. Enrique did not insist on coming upstairs. He knew my silences. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Call me if you need anything." As soon as I closed the door, my body collapsed. I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply sat on the floor, drenched from head to toe, water dripping from my hair onto the boards beneath me. I stared at the stained ceiling as if it were somehow more comforting than Eduardo's arms had ever been. How could he? How could he? Days passed in silence. I did not go out. I barely ate. I slept and woke in the same place, as if time had stopped around me. Enrique came by, left food at my door, and sent messages I did not answer. How could I speak to the world when I could not even face myself? On the fourth morning, my phone buzzed non-stop. Messages, calls, more messages. Then Enrique's voice came from outside my door. "Open the door. It's urgent." I dragged myself up and unlocked it. He rushed inside holding his phone. "You need to see." On the screen was a video of Fabiana in the hospital, wearing a neck brace and performing for a local reporter. "I just wanted to help," she said tearfully. But she hated me for being close to Eduardo. She pushed me. I feared for my life. I just want justice. I felt sick. Fabiana, who had faked the entire thing, was now playing the victim on live television. And worse, people were believing her. The comments were brutal. Poor woman. Another jealous psycho. Eduardo got out just in time. They're painting you as unstable, Alicia, Enrique said through clenched teeth. Like the slap was just the beginning of something much darker. Eduardo hasn't said a word. He is not defending you. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding against my ribs. They were destroying me again. But this time, it was not behind closed doors. This time, it was public. And Eduardo knew. He had seen enough to know the truth, or at least enough to doubt Fabiana. But still, he remained silent. They won't stop, I whispered. They want to erase me. First they humiliated me, then they discarded me. Now they are turning me into a criminal. And he is letting them. Enrique looked at me as if he was waiting for what came next. But I did not know. Not yet. The next morning, I got up early and returned to the university. People welcomed me with caution. They knew Eduardo's family had funded my education, but they never knew why. I reactivated my enrollment using the money I had saved, the same money I had refused to spend before, because deep down, some part of me must have known I would need it to start over. People stared at me in the hallways. They whispered. They looked me up and down, but I walked with my head held high, even if inside I felt like ashes. During one of my law classes, the professor asked me to stay after. I thought it would be a warning, maybe a polite way of telling me the scandal was creating problems for the university. Instead, he closed the door and said, Leisha, I read your paper from last semester. I've also seen the news. I know you are being treated unfairly. If you want help, I know a good lawyer. In that moment, I realized something. Maybe I had lost one battle, but I was not finished. There were still fights ahead, and this time, I had allies. That night, back at the boarding house, I sat down with Enrique and told him everything. Every detail, every insult, every quiet humiliation, every moment I had swallowed just to survive. He listened without interrupting. Then he looked me straight in the eyes and asked, Do you want justice or revenge? I did not hesitate. Both. Without another word, he smirked and placed a folder on the table. Then let's begin. Revenge is not like in the movies. There is no dramatic music, no fiery speech, no explosion of rage that magically changes everything. Real revenge is silence. It is cold clarity. It is the moment pain stops burning and starts sharpening. It is when grief becomes calculation and betrayal becomes a weapon you finally learn how to aim. That night, Enrique and I sat in my tiny room at the boarding house. The walls were thin, and the rain outside tapped steadily against the window like a heartbeat, reminding me that time was moving forward, whether I was ready or not. Enrique opened the folder slowly. There were no names inside yet, only outlines, questions, timelines, and risks. But the first thing he said rewired something in my mind. They used her pain to tell a false story. Now you are going to use that same story to destroy them. I did not respond. I only nodded. We started at the beginning. Enrique took notes, while I recounted everything I had endured in that house. Not with tears this time, but with focus. The humiliation. The way Renata constantly reminded me I was just an orphan. Juliana's passive-aggressive comments during dinners. Dona Helena's commands disguised as kind advice. Eduardo's quiet indifference dressed up as affection. And of course, the final blow. Fabiana. Every name, every scene, every cold glance, every cruel word, everything was documented. Enrique treated it like building a case, not only legally, but morally. He was not just my best friend. He was the first person to look at me and still see a whole woman, even while I was shattered. You are not just trying to clear your name anymore, Enrique said. He wrote one word in big letters across the top of the page. Credibility. Their credibility is their shield, he said. Your downfall was built on that shield. If we crack it, the rest will collapse. In the days that followed, Enrique took me to a small, no-frills law firm. That was where I met Marcos. Marcos was sharp, quiet, and had zero tolerance for rich people who believed they were above consequences. I have seen families like this before, he said during our first meeting. They use money and image to control everything. If you want to take them down, it will not be with rage. It will be with strategy and precision. So we started digging. Old text messages, bank records, Email exchanges showing how Fabiana had reinserted herself into Eduardo's life well before the staircase incident. Recordings of Dona Helena, pressuring me to know my place. Bit by bit, we began connecting the dots of a web they thought no one could untangle. Enrique built a second file, the image file. We tracked their public appearances, media coverage, charity events, and business connections. Renata sat on a local women's business board and loved pretending she supported underprivileged women. Juliana posted motivational quotes about empathy, but we found audio of her mocking me behind closed doors. And Eduardo, with his pressed suits and gentle voice, always looked so honorable in public. That was his mask. But the worst discovery was about Fabiana. Since her hospital interview, she had gone quiet online, but Enrique was resourceful. He contacted an old classmate of hers, and that was when we learned Fabiana was trying to partner with women's rights organizations, using my name and our incident as the foundation of her new public persona. She was turning the story she had fabricated into a platform. She wanted to be a symbol, a martyr. I felt sick. She is manipulating real people now, Enrique warned. You are not just fighting a family anymore. You are fighting a narrative. People will defend her because they believe she is a survivor. I know, I said without blinking. That was when Marcos leaned forward and said the sentence that defined our entire strategy. If she wants to be a symbol, then we will make sure the world knows it is a lie. But slowly, first we plant doubt, then we deliver truth. That night, I returned to my room alone. I lay on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling the way I used to when I wanted to disappear. But I did not want to disappear anymore. I wanted them to feel what I felt that day in the rain. The whole world watching you fall, and no one reaching out. The difference was that I had survived. They would not be so lucky. And they had no idea what was coming. They thought I would vanish. They thought the rain that soaked me that night had washed away my dignity too. They thought I would become another rejected woman, humiliated and silenced by a carefully crafted narrative. What they did not know was that every tear I cried had turned into strategy, and I was ready to return everything, not with shouting, not with threats, with truth, cold, undeniable, public truth. The first piece on the board was Fabiana. She was the foundation of the lie, the perfect victim, the fragile, sweet, heartbroken woman. But her mask had a crack, and I knew exactly where to press. Enrique created a fake profile on a social media page focused on women's advocacy. It had a believable name and a solid backstory. He started liking Fabiana's posts, commenting with admiration, and supporting her carefully staged public pain. She fell for it instantly. In her mind, she was gaining another loyal supporter. Then Enrique, with Marcos's help, struck. A post appeared on that profile, an anonymous article titled, "When the Victim Lies, the Other Side of the Story." It did not mention names. It only told a very familiar tale, eerily similar to hers, but from the perspective of the woman who had been falsely accused. It ended with one simple question. What if not every woman who claims to have been pushed is telling the truth? The reaction was immediate. The comments exploded. Some people defended Fabiana fiercely, but others started to question the story. This sounds too familiar. Why was there never a video of the fall? Why has the ex-husband never spoken up? Fabiana stayed silent for 2 days. On the third day, she posted a tearful statement using the same hospital photos as before, claiming how hard it was to be discredited and re-traumatized. That was when Enrique dropped the bomb. A screenshot. Fabiana at a party, laughing and dancing, taken on the exact date she claimed to be bedridden. The source was one of her old friends, who had posted it without realizing what Fabiana had been pretending. The internet did the rest. Her credibility collapsed. Organizations that had once wanted her for speaking engagements quickly distanced themselves. Eduardo's silence was now seen as complicity. And me? I did not say a word. I did not have to. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was blooming. But that was not enough. I wanted more. Next was Renata, the self-proclaimed businesswoman who empowered young women. Enrique found out that her company hired unpaid interns, forced them to work long hours, and even made them pay for their own uniforms. Marcos gathered documentation, testimonies from former interns, screenshots, schedules, messages, everything. We published it on a labor rights blog, and the post gained traction fast. The very next day, Renata lost a massive contract with a brand that refused to work with exploitative companies. Then came Juliana. She was easy. Enrique uncovered an audio recording from a party where Juliana laughed and said, "Leisha thought she was going to be a princess. She ended up as a maid with a ring." The clip went viral. Juliana tried to deny it. She claimed it had been edited. Enrique asked a tech expert friend to analyze it, and the expert proved it was authentic. Juliana was removed from a youth business association, and her name became synonymous with elitist cruelty. By then, the family's public image was in ruins. But the main event was still ahead. Eduardo, the man who had stayed silent, the man who had watched all of it happen, the man who let them tear me apart so he could protect his precious reputation. Marcos managed to obtain a copy of our prenuptial agreement. One clause was clear. Any proof of infidelity during the marriage would void post-divorce benefits. Through more digging, Enrique got access to message logs between Eduardo and Fabiana, flirty, intimate exchanges from weeks before the alleged fall, including one message on the exact day of the accident. Marcos called Eduardo to a legal meeting. Eduardo arrived calm, wearing his usual smug smile, thinking it was about money. But when he saw the documents, the proof, the timestamps, the undeniable truth, he turned pale. "This could destroy my name," he said, visibly shaken. "Exactly," I replied, using the same soft tone he had once used when telling me to be understanding at his family dinners. He tried to offer a settlement. A lot of money. He said he would pay whatever I wanted if I kept everything private. I smiled and declined. "I do not want your money, Eduardo. I want the world to know who you really are." Then I stood, looked him in the eyes one last time, and said, "You let them humiliate me. You watched me fall alone in the rain. Now it is your turn to feel the cold." And I walked out. For the first time, I felt no fear, no guilt. I was no longer defending myself. I was delivering justice. Fabiana disappeared from the internet. Renata lost 2 lawsuits filed by former interns. Juliana deactivated all her accounts and ended up selling secondhand clothes online. Eduardo started appearing in news articles with headlines like, "The man who stayed silent, when complicity speaks louder than words." And me? I went back to school. I landed an internship at a law firm that saw courage in me, not scandal. Enrique stayed by my side. And every time the anger tried to return, I remembered one thing. They thought I would beg. But the ones begging now were not me. They had always said I was nothing. Because I was an orphan, I should be grateful. Being with Eduardo was an opportunity. I should learn to stay quiet, smile, and accept my place. I heard it in so many ways. Whispered. Dressed up as advice. Delivered with fake concern, a constant reminder of where I came from, as if that decided where I was allowed to go. But watching each of them unravel inside their own lies, I realized how wrong they had been. Being an orphan did not make me weak. It was exactly what made me strong. Abandonment taught me how to survive. Loneliness taught me not to expect anything from anyone. Pain taught me how to stand back up with clenched fists and a steady heart. The following months felt like breathing for the first time. I returned to university, this time with a full scholarship. Not because someone pitied me, and not because some wealthy family was paying for me as part of a bargain, because I earned it. My name began circulating among professors and academic boards. One of my papers on justice and psychological violence was published in the faculty's law journal. Enrique, still by my side, became more than my best friend. He became my business partner. Together, we launched a small legal advocacy project for women like me, women who had been silenced, erased, or manipulated by those in power. One morning, while I was having breakfast in the kitchen of the boarding house, Dona Olivia looked at me with tears in her eyes. "When you arrived here," she said, "you looked like a little bird with a broken wing. Now look at you. You are a storm." And I smiled. Truly smiled. For the first time in a long while, because yes, I had become the storm they feared. Eduardo eventually requested a leave of absence from his family's company. Sponsors began to withdraw after the scandals. The image he had built so carefully did not collapse in one loud explosion. It crumbled quietly, piece by piece. No dramatic headlines were needed, just the truth, slow and steady, eating away at the foundation. Fabiana tried to reinvent herself as an advocate in another city. It did not work. Wherever she went, someone already knew the truth. The real story traveled faster than her carefully staged one. She became a shadow of the character she had tried to play. Renata found herself buried in lawsuits and labor audits. The woman who once spoke about empowering women now flinched at every email she received. Juliana vanished from public view. The last I heard, she was living with an aunt in the countryside, offline and avoiding everyone after the audio went viral. And me? I never had to touch them. I never had to scream. I never needed drama. All I had to do was be the woman they underestimated. The orphan who never belonged to anyone and still stood tall. One quiet afternoon, Enrique and I sat in our small new office. He looked at me over his coffee and asked, "So what are you going to do now that you're free?" I looked out the window. The sky was cloudy, just like the day everything ended. But this time, it was not raining inside me. This time, I was not trembling. I was whole. "Now," I said, "I live. Because I owed them nothing. No explanations. No guilt. No pain. I exposed them. I faced them. They dragged me to the bottom, and I climbed out with my own hands. They always said I had no one. But they were wrong. I always had myself. And now they had nothing. That was the end of the revenge. But it was only the beginning of my story. What was left after the revenge? Silence. Peace. A kind of emptiness that, for the first time, did not hurt. It felt like I had spent years holding my breath. And finally, I could exhale. No more surprise visits. No more judgmental stares. No more manipulative messages. The ghosts had gone quiet, and I was still standing. For real this time. For a while, I thought I would be alone forever. I thought that after everything I had been through, no one would ever truly reach me. But the truth was not about the world. It was about me. I was still living in survival mode, my heart hidden in a trench, waiting for the next attack. But Enrique was never a threat. He did not try to fix me. He did not make grand promises. He did not give dramatic speeches. He simply stayed. He was there on the good days, and on the days when I did not speak at all. He was there when I laughed, and he was there when I broke a glass and collapsed into tears like the world was ending. He would only look at me and say, "It's okay, Alicia, I'm here." And he always was. The first time I noticed something had shifted was on a random night after a long meeting with a client. We were both exhausted, sitting on the office couch, eating cold pizza, and laughing at something silly I cannot even remember now. Then he looked at me just a second longer than usual. I felt it, and instead of looking away, I looked back. There was no tension, no fear, only calm. Enrique felt like home, but he was also something new, something I had never had before. Safety without control, presence without pressure, love without pity. Things did not change overnight. There was no magical happily ever after. But slowly, without even realizing it, we started sharing more than an office. We started sharing a life. He began picking me up from evening classes at the university. He left a toothbrush at my apartment. And when I got sick, he stayed by my side for 3 days straight without complaint. That was when I knew he was already part of my life. Quietly. Naturally. Completely. One afternoon, months after everything had happened, we were walking hand in hand downtown. We passed a newsstand, and on the cover of a magazine, in small print, was Eduardo's name. It was part of a feature about public figures in decline. I paused for 1 second. Then I kept walking. Enrique gave my hand a gentle squeeze and said, with that crooked smile I had grown to love, "Not even worth the energy anymore, huh?" I smiled back. I barely remember that life. And it was true. I had not forgotten what they did to me, but I no longer needed to carry it. The wound had healed, and even though revenge had once given me strength, it was not what fueled me anymore. Now I found power in the little things. A warm cup of coffee at the end of the day. A random text during work. The smell of Enrique sleeping beside me. It was not a fairy tale. It was not perfect, but it was real. And it was mine. For a long time, I thought the only way to move on was to shout my pain to the world. But sometimes, the real beginning comes in silence, when you finally give yourself permission to leave the past where it belongs. And if someone asks me whether I still think about that family, that house, that stormy night, the answer is yes. Sometimes I do, but only with the kind of detachment you feel when remembering an old dream. Because now, I have finally woken up. Time passed, not like it does in movies. There were no grand finales, no dramatic plot twists. It passed quietly, through slow mornings, small routines, and steady breaths. Life found its rhythm again. I moved forward. But sometimes, even when there is no anger left, curiosity lingers. What happened to them? The ones who once thought they were untouchable. The ones who thought I would never rise. The answer was simple. The truth always comes for everyone. And the best part was that I no longer had to do a thing. Fabiana tried everything to rebuild herself. She moved cities. She changed her appearance. She tried to rebrand as an activist online. She posted videos with tearful speeches and shared inspirational quotes about strength and survival. But the cracks in her story were impossible to cover. Brands backed away. Followers disappeared. People whispered her name like a warning. The last I heard, she was living with an aunt, avoiding cameras, interviews, and anything resembling a spotlight. The role of victim had become too heavy even for her. Renata, the so-called business icon, fell from grace quickly. Labor lawsuits piled up. Former interns spoke out about abuse, exploitation, and mistreatment. The women's leadership group she used to brag about dissolved in silence. She tried launching an online store, but with no support, no partners, and no respected name left to lean on, it faded. Now she lives quietly, far from the boardrooms and bright lights she once ruled. Juliana vanished completely after her cruel audio went viral. Brands dropped her instantly. She tried rebranding as a self-love coach, but it did not last. No one believed her anymore. Rumors said she was living with a distant relative in a small town, without social media, rarely leaving the house. And honestly, I did not hate her. I felt sorry for her. She had spent so long pretending to be above everyone that when she fell, she had no idea who she was without applause. And Eduardo, the man who watched me break. Of course, he tried to rebuild his reputation. He took a break from the family business for personal reasons, but everyone knew why. People stopped trusting him, not only because of what he had done, but because of what he had refused to do. Because he stayed silent when he should have spoken. That silence became his legacy. He tried to remarry twice. Neither relationship lasted. Not because of betrayal, but because no one wanted to be with a man who could stand by and let his wife be destroyed. The younger generation called him out. The older one turned their backs. He faded slowly, shrinking into a version of himself even he did not recognize. The man who once said I needed him was now the one left with nothing. And me? I lived. I grew. I rebuilt. Enrique and I built something real. We made mistakes. We laughed. We healed together. We created a project that helped women like me, women who had been silenced, dismissed, and erased. I turned my pain into purpose. I never returned to that house. I never looked back with hurt. Only with distance. The past is still there, but it does not own me. It simply reminds me of what I survived. It reminds me that I was stronger than all of it. It reminds me that the name Leisha, the name they tried to shame, now stands tall on its own. And if I could go back and speak to that version of me, the one soaked in rain, holding divorce papers, alone and broken, I would whisper just one thing. You did not lose. You were set free. And time proved it to everyone. I have thought many times about how to end this story. For so long, I imagined what I would say if I ever made it here alive, whole, and strong. But now that I am here, looking back, I realize the most powerful words are not the ones that hurt. They are the ones that set you free. I am not a hero. I am not perfect. I am not some flawless symbol of survival. I fell hard. I was humiliated, betrayed, and ignored. I was torn down by people I once respected. And when I thought I could not fall any further, I did. But I survived. Not because someone came to save me. Because I chose not to let myself die inside. I was used, manipulated, and discarded by a family who thought they were too important to care about someone like me. But in the end, they were the ones who crumbled under the weight of their own lies. And do you know what hurt the most? It was not the betrayal. It was not the public shame. It was how much I erased myself just to be accepted. It was how small I made myself while trying to fit. I thought that if I was quiet enough, kind enough, and good enough, someone would finally choose me. But you do not win by shrinking. You win when you finally understand that you never needed to be chosen. You only needed to choose yourself. If there is one thing this story taught me, it is that not every wound needs revenge, but every wound needs a lesson. I did not become strong by hurting them back. I became strong the moment I understood my worth. Today, I do not need Eduardo's apology. I do not need Juliana's approval. I do not need Renata's recognition, because the one person I truly needed to see me finally does. Me. With all my scars. With all my mistakes. With all the strength it took to start over. This story ends here, but my life does not. It moves forward with love, with freedom, with truth, and with one final promise. I will never be silent again.